Ave Maria listeners, God bless. This is Tea with Mary, coming all the way from sunny Dundee. Now, this is show number 209. We have a beautiful guest today, beautiful topic. We are honored today on this. This is the vigil of the Christ the King. And for those who follow the Roman calendar, we'll talk about that later. We have an honored guest, John Deighan, Chief Executive Officer of the Society of the Protection of the Unborn Children. We use this acronym. If you can know, today we talk about SPUC. John has dedicated his life to defending the unborn and advocating for a society that values every human life from conception. Under his leadership, the SPUC has a strong voice in the fight against the culture of death, working tirelessly to uphold the dignity of life. With decades of experience in both public policy and advocacy, John brings in invaluable insights on how we can push back against this tragic tide of abortion and restore a culture of life. So we welcome you to the show, John.
Thanks, Father. I'm delighted to join you.
Okay, so actually it's quite providential, John, that we can speak today because there's so many things happening in this fight for life. For example, the abortion so-called law being passed in October 27, 1967, anniversary tomorrow, 57 years. And then this law came and hit the streets on April 27th, 1968. So convenient to speak about this today. Also, we have, if we can have a chance to speak about the attack on free speech. One of our great friends, Adam Connor-Smith, was found guilty of thought crime a few weeks ago, praying outside an abortion facility in Bournemouth. To understand where we're going with this nonsense, this confusion. Also, we have this fight to defend life in relation to assisted suicide. And we have a beautiful message actually from the friars, the priests are incarnated into the Diocese of Portsmouth. The bishop is Bishop Philip Egan, and he has actually committed a pastoral letter to be read in the vigil masses tonight and tomorrow, which we have some information on, so we can read that. And also, remembering in a few weeks' time, we have the US election, which is really being fought on the fight for life, on the banner of the lesser evil. Okay, but before we start, we're going to show you a picture, John. All right? See if you can recognize who is in this picture. While the technology, the friars organize this picture. Okay. Can you see that?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so this was on Thursday in Dundee, in sunny Dundee, no? This is the society, the SPUC, Silent Witness. Do you recognize this square in Dundee? Have you been there?
Yes, I have indeed. Not for usually we have the torchlight procession in Glasgow the same night, so it's typically I do the Glasgow one. But yeah, this has been a great witness for many years. Lots of stalwarts, SPUC members have kept the flame alive, literally.
But it was a beautiful witness. It was very. Last year, the weather was foul, no, but it wasn't too bad on Thursday. Okay, so. First off, we can speak about your family background and how you came to be so passionate for life, the dignity of life, and tell us a little bit about the foundation of the Society of Protection of Unborn Children.
Father, when I think about this, I wish I had some great revelatory moment that I thought.
Yes.
Suddenly, this is my calling. I grew up in a practicing Catholic family. I was the oldest of 7 children. So yeah, faith was always part of that. You know, my dad went to mass every day. My mum was a member of the Legion of Mary, the UCM. So I was quite, you know, just going to mass, and the Catholic faith was just central to that. You know, we went to Catholic school. A lot of social activities.
Was this in Glasgow? Was this in Glasgow?
I grew up in Linwood.
Okay.
Linwood, which is it was famous at that time for the car factory, Chrysler car factory. Yeah, I grew up in Linwood, not far from Paisley, just next to Paisley, where I live now, and that in turn is not far from Glasgow. So I grew up there. The parish was St Conro's. So life was more straightforward then. Being Catholic, well, certainly for me, I just assumed that it was just accepted. You know, I never had any doubts about it. The social events around the parish, you know, at the weekend there was a film club run by the parish. You know, I went to the boxing club run by the parish, went to the football club run by the parish. You know, involved in school event. You know, so it was quite favourable to anyone who was interested in their faith. I mean, I remember when I was thinking about this, I thought, yeah, it was very accessible to be Catholic. You know, at school we were regularly given the opportunity to go to confession. You know, you'd have at school. The school teachers would turn up every morning during Lent for 8 o'clock mass. So that was right. I mean, I remember my childhood. Your whole class was at morning mass, and then there was a 15-minute walk up the road. And so it just it was easy to be Catholic. It just seemed natural. So that was my upbringing. In terms of the pro-life issue, I just knew that life was special. I love my life. I've always loved life and loved my own life. And I thought, well, why wouldn't I love it for everyone else? So when the pro-life issue becomes evident to you, what's going on, the destruction of human life, you just think this is wrong. It just appeals to some deep core of justice that I have, that I just can't accept this. And all of us are called to different issues. I think God does plant in people particular vocations. You know, so some people are called to throw their life into helping the homeless or helping the disabled, or particular areas. You know, focusing on religion, becoming a priest, becoming a friar. For me, certainly the pro-life was part of that. I sort of was fortunate enough, I suppose, to have a cousin. Really, I sort of he was an older generation of me, Robert Graham, who ran Life in Scotland. He was my mum's cousin. He was sort of ages with my mum. So I remember doing a sponsored event with Robert when I must have still been in primary school. So I think just having that witness of other people in your life is something that impacts you. And Robert was a stalwart for the pro-life cause right to his death. And in fact, it was him who established the torchlight procession right every year, and asked me as he got older if SPUC would take that over from him and continue. So we have continued to do that, and in many ways honouring his memory. Absolutely committed to the cause for life. So yeah, I think being pro-life is something it's natural. It's unnatural not to be, I think, but depending on our circumstances, our life moves in many twists and turns, and suddenly you find you're doing things that you're surprised how you found yourself there. So I suppose I get more involved in SPUC in the 90s. I had just got married. I'd moved to East Kilbride, and I became the chairman of the East Kilbride SPUC branch. So I was quite involved then, and at that time I was a lecturer at Motherwell College. So I lectured there, and I wore the feet, tiny feet, as a lecturer, and that got me into lots of conversations with students. Were fascinated with that, so I quickly became known as being pro-life. There was no hostility, even though people didn't always agree. It wasn't as aggressive and angry as the issue has become now, I don't think. So people would have come to me and asked me about the pro-life issue, and then just life unfolded. I get more involved with SPUC and the pro-life movement. So yeah, it's part of the calling, Father, and I had a good formation in the faith, growing up in a Catholic family, and this is just an extension of that.
Okay. All right. Thank you. So first topic we can speak about. We know, for example, I think the figure for abortions in the UK is around about 10.5 million since 1967, and we have this catastrophe for the last few years of pills by post, or they call it DIY abortions. And we know SPUCs have been heavily engaged in this campaign against the coerced abortion. But in the last period, we've had these exclusion zones passed in England and also in Scotland. Basically, I think there's a couple of subtle differences. I think in Scotland, it's a 200-meter zone, and I think in England, it's 150 meters. But just want to read something that came out at the Bishops' Conference by Bishop John Deighan, who must be your bishop in Paisley.
Yes.
He said, "This is a chilling day for fundamental freedoms, including our basic right as citizens in Scotland to manifest our belief in public, religious or otherwise. None of the arguments made were able to get round the basic premise that police in Scotland have never asked for more powers and even told the Parliament that they were really uncomfortable with the bewildering suggestion," nice word there, the bewildering suggestion of having to police people's thoughts under the new law. He continues, "The Bishops' Conference in Scotland condemns all harassment and intimidation of people, but continues to note the poor case made that this sort of behaviour was in any way the ethos of Scottish vigils, and endorses the view of the police in Scotland that there are already ample laws in place to deal with such behaviour. This law is certainly unnecessary in terms of public order and will be disproportionately affect citizens of faith." He continues, "While we commend the one MSP, is that the member of the Scottish Parliament? Is that what that means?"
Yes, yeah.
Yes, who was prepared to recognise and call out the injustice of this draconian law, which now criminalises citizens' thoughts and makes it illegal to pray in certain parts of the country. It is concerning that there was only one. I mean, how many one? What's one out of how many? Do we know?
There's 129. So I think there were 3 abstentions. Man, yeah, I think that shows. So John Mason was the one MSP who voted against it.
So police in Scotland will be responsible for enforcing the new law. If an individual or individuals are deemed to be in breach of the law, they could be fined up to £10,000 under summary procedure or an unlimited amount under a solemn procedure. Okay, so the first point I would like to ask you, John, in relation to this, is that this law in Scotland seems a bit even more draconian than one in England, because is it right that within the 200-meter zone, if somebody hears you speaking about this issue, then they could take offence, no?
Yes. Anything you do in that zone to influence, even in your own home. We've been contacted by some supporters who actually live within the vicinity of an abortion facility or a place where abortions are taking place. And yeah, I mean, in fact, one got in touch. I was chatting to one person about it, and if you were in your home and a relative comes and they're thinking about having an abortion and they chat to you about it, what do you think? And if you try to say, well, I think it's a good idea actually to give the child a chance, that person could go and report you to the police. I mean, it's absurd. Yeah, it's a level of vindictiveness and tolerance that's quite remarkable. And I think it shows the health of our democracy that only one person can actually see that. Now, there's no other issue. I mean, I've seen a lot of violent demonstrations in my life, and yeah, no one would ever dream of doing anything like this. But I think it's proportionate, I suppose, to how bad their consciences are. I think it's a huge industry, the ending of unborn life. So I think that's what it's proportionate to. It's not proportionate to what's happening.
Yes,
the police gave evidence to say that there was no harassment. There is no harassment taking place. They know that. But the media is very compliant and repeating that about the harassment and intimidation. They just keep repeating that, no evidence whatsoever. And I spoke to the Scottish government and made that point. And the point the civil servant said, well, just because there's no evidence doesn't mean it's not happening. You know what I mean? So that's the threshold
Yes,
of the law. You know, so it's quite remarkable. Yeah, so I think that shows the health of politics in general, but the Scottish Parliament is worse.
The question I have on this topic for you is, we interviewed you. No doubt you know Richard Lucas, no?
Yeah, he's a good friend. Yeah,
yes, who's head of the Scottish Family Party.
Yeah,
he did a conference here in Dundee, and we've had him on the Tea with Mary, and he cites certain reasons why, you know, even against common sense, why it's wrong to kill the baby in the womb. But one of the things that he said was quite interesting. I'd like your comment on this. Is that why all of this, and this has been going on for the last 7-8 years, all this preponderance on the exclusion zones, is it a deliberate tactic to move away from the real issue that we're killing babies, no?
Yeah, I've asked myself that as well, Father. Yeah, there's a few points. I think genuinely it just really got under the skin of abortion supporters, that you had a few people who just were a witness, constantly reminding them of the position. And I think when your conscience knows that it's done something wrong, or it supports something that's wrong, that is a really painful reminder. So they've turned their anger on the group, and they think, if I can close them down and get rid of them. So I think there is part of that. The abortion industry in general is massive. So there's lots of them who are paid. That's their job to do it. You know, their job is to advance abortion, and then they have a group of disciples who are radicalized, and they are looking for somewhere to pour out their anger. So I think the fact that you saw things like 40 Days for Life come to the UK and start to have vigils in a more organized manner, that gave them a target. And so they've been building up, you know, even we've heard of incidents of, it's the pro-abortionists will send a bus to a particular vigil, and they'll get women out screaming and shouting, causing a disturbance. It's they caused the disturbance, but then they will be reported that there was a disturbance at a pro-life vigil. But, you know, the news never ever digs into that, never ever digs into the threats and intimidation and even violence, typically against elderly people who are standing quietly praying. That typically is what's happening. But there's this radicalized group willing to do anything to intimidate, just to get rid of them.
Yes, it'd be interesting to see how this law for the buffer zones will be enforced by the police, no? As it mentioned on this comment by Bishop John Deighan, that really they haven't got the appetite themselves, no?
I think I stumbled across a YouTube video by chance, a guy I've never come across him before, I think it was called the Black Belt Barrister. And I don't think he was a guy of faith. I think he's just commenting, and he just come across the case of Adam Connor Smith, and he was a bit perplexed about how this could be happening in a democracy. And so it was interesting. It would be worth going on to YouTube if you've not come across that guy. But he certainly sounded rational. But it sounded, I think, what normal people in the street would think, or normal policemen who know the people who are doing the vigils. I mean, I was aware, and I attended some meetings in the early days of them having the vigil in Glasgow, for example, with the police. And it was a very cordial relationship. And the people doing it are very reasonable, very caring. In their view, they are there to give women a last gasp help. Actually, the entrance, you'd have to go out of your way to try and spot them, actually, if you were going in to have an abortion. It's really difficult. You know, you drive past, you can hardly see them. There's several entrances to go that would avoid them. So you really have to be looking for offence. And if women are all, you know, absolutely convinced that abortion is what they want, and they think they're doing the right thing, you know, it wouldn't bother me if someone was outside the dentist shouting, "Oh, I'm against, you know, fillings in teeth" or something. I'll just shrug my shoulders and walk past, you know. But, you know, it's an absurd, disproportionate response that we're seeing.
I mean, if it, you know, if one of the things that crossed my mind is, you know, if we trying to evaluate what somebody's thinking, no. I mean, have we all got the gift of Padre Pio? We can see inside people's souls, no.
yeah.
It's okay. So, anyhow, we pray for this. This, you know, this so-called law. See how it pans out. Hopefully, it might be unenforceable. I know that, you know, for example, the Good Counsel Network down London, when they had their main vigil excluded, the one in Ealing, it had a big impact on their clients. No, I think the Claire McCulloch, who was running that, said that, you know, at that point in time, they were losing 6 out of 7 clients. But the message has to be for the people to still go out onto the streets, no, with this exclusion zone. So this would be for the hospitals in Edinburgh and Glasgow. Now the people would be. Is this buffer zone in place now?
Yes, so the law is in place. So yeah, so if anyone turns up now, the police will have to confront them. I think it did happen once, and there was a verbal warning. I understand from news coverage. But yeah, I mean, the point you were making about, is this a side issue that's distracting us? I think it's a window into the intolerance of the abortion movement. It really is an industry. They can't tolerate opposition. But we do have to remember that the ending of innocent life is going on day in, day out. And in the UK now, it's over 250,000 a year. So it's a staggering number at a time when the demographic impact is huge. I mean, it genuinely is an unsustainable future. And yet our politicians and civil servants, they would rather the country sinks than actually reevaluate the position.
Yes.
You know, even if they say, I mean, even, we don't actually need the law to change. Even if we said, look, there is a better option. If you want to have children are an investment in the future, there is a better option. And instead of the money we would pay for an abortion, we will give you that money to give you some help.
Yes.
I mean, we have a service called Ave Maria that we give grants to students who are in crisis pregnancy situations. It doesn't take a lot of money to give people the necessities they need. And they are at a stage, there's a lot of emotional pressure. So, you know, we're in no illusion that finding out you're pregnant for some people is a nightmare. You know, they really are desperate. And if someone's just saying to you, it's no big deal, come this way, it will all be over, and then you'll never have to think about it again. That does sound attractive, but it's not true. It's not true. So it damages the people involved. You know, the poor young women who are taken in by that. You know, a lot of them are deeply damaged by that. But it's damaging the future of our society. Why on earth would a government not think, okay, let's even make a level playing field? There are people out there who think they've got a better offer. Let's put equal money into that, and let's see how they can help people. Everyone I know who's got a baby is full of joy when they see that baby.
Yes.
Everyone. You never come across them saying, "Oh, I need rid of that baby." It would be highly unusual. So a life of a baby is a gift, and yet there's an absolute determination, for whatever reason, of some people that they want to snuff out life, and they want to make sure that whether they think if more people choose what they chose or more people chose the service that they're promoting, it justifies them. Perhaps that's what's motivating them, but it really is irrational in an age when we're supposed to be the age of reason.
I mean, one of the interesting points you made there, just before we move on to the next topic of assisted suicide, is, you know, when I was at school, when we used to examine the population of different countries, and the population of either the UK or Great Britain was always about 60 million. And every time I've looked at that figure, even in the last 20, 30 years, it always seems to be about the same figure. Now, does that mean that it's a deliberate policy, the fact that we have no babies, and the slack is being taken up basically by immigrants? No, it all seems to be the same, whether it's a deliberate policy, no?
Yeah. Well, there was famously the book by Paul Ehrlich, The Population Bomb, that frightened everyone. You know, the world was going to run out of resources. That's been proven wrong time and time again. You know, people are creative. You know, a new life into the world makes our survival more likely, makes our flourishing more likely. But you have these people, you know, right back, everyone will have heard of Malthus and the Malthusian theory, yes, that, you know, as populations grow geometrically and food production grows arithmetically, we're going to all run out of food and we're all going to starve. There's an abundance of food if it were properly provided across the world. You know, so there might be problems in making sure that we get food to people, but that's typically a problem when we have wars and corrupt governments. You know, so the world can produce more than enough. One of my staff, Emmett Dooley, does a great presentation on the world population, and he shows you just how abundant the space and the resources we have for accommodating everyone in the world easily. So it's all there, but this hoax that the world's overpopulated, people just keep repeating it. It takes a long time to unteach a lie.
The language,
we've had that lie going from especially from the 60s.
The language controls the masses. Okay, so just for the listeners, in the next few weeks, we will be covering this topic on the assisted suicide. When is the next point of debate on this one, John? Is it November?
I think the 16th of November will be in for the UK level at Westminster. There will be what's called the second reading. That's the first time that will be actually a discussion on it and a vote.
And yeah,
that will be the 16th.
That's interesting because for us that's the solemnity of St. Margaret of Scotland, November the 16th. No?
Oh, November. Well, we better send our power down to England because it will be debated in London. So in Scotland, we have ongoing the committee are looking at the MacArthur bill in Scotland. So typically, this is what you find in the anti-life sort of movement. You know, they try and pressurize different parts of the UK and just say where can we get in. So they've tried Scotland a few times now with two pieces of legislation, but before that there was already sort of a back road in or a back door in through the Adults with Incapacity bill that I was involved in contesting when I worked for the Catholic bishops in Scotland. And then the Jeremy Purvis also tried to get a bill introduced, but then we saw Margaret MacDonald bringing a bill forward and then Patrick Harvey. So we've seen fights in the Parliament, Scottish Parliament on assisted suicide. In England, you've seen pushes as well. Last major one was in 2015 with the Rob Maris bill. But again, we managed to get those off. The key thing for assisted suicide is people learning a bit about it. That's the key. That's what I found for the last 20 odd years I've been involved in contesting assisted suicide. No one in the world is for suffering. So if someone comes along and says, listen, this is a way out of suffering, everyone's volunteering for it. But when you find out what happens when you tell some people in society they're allowed to kill people, it's actually quite terrifying. So I think getting the truth out, that's been the thing I think that has convinced politicians. The last several times we've seen legislation proposed. I think when the politicians, no matter what the public opinions polls are saying, because usually that's quite a superficial understanding of the issue, but for politicians who genuinely look into it, they realise that you just cannot control it. Yes. And once you say that it's okay to kill some people, it will always lead to the expansion of who you kill, and it also will give massive opportunity for people who have something to benefit. And just now, actually, we were talking about the demographic issue. There's a massive benefit to the NHS, you know, if they got and the government. So if the government think, oh well, typically you spend about 50% of the money that you will use up from the NHS budget in your lifetime will be used up in your last 3 years of life. So think if you could have the indicators that would suggest that you're in the last 3 years of life, and you could convince the population that they would be better off dead, then you would save 50% of the NHS budget. Do you know what I mean? That's a simple. Yes. There must be some bean counter somewhere. Someone who was involved in working at Europe once told me that civil servants there had told him that secretly they were looking at the cost implications. I remember debating Margot MacDonald on radio, and I made that point to her. Margot, in your bill proposal, you put down that this would save money. Now, I don't think that was her intention at all, and I think, to be honest, she was a kind-hearted, decent person.
Yes.
But, and it's often kind, decent people who buy into something that they superficially think is good, but behind that reality that this is a cost-saving measure, and some people will just think, well, if you don't think there's anything to gain and you think people are old and they're lonely, then why on earth would we have them go on and it costs the rest of society so much money?
Okay, so just to mention for the listeners, in the next few weeks, we hopefully be interviewing a moral theologian called Father Alexander Lucy Smith. I think he was in the Arundel and Brighton diocese, and also Dr. Dominic Whitehouse, who's very prominent in this area. I just wanted to, for the listeners' benefit, because also this is for my benefit, just to make this distinction between euthanasia and assisted suicide and also suicide. So, okay, first, euthanasia, a medical professional administers the lethal dose to end the patient's life. A medical professional administers the lethal dose to end the patient's life. Euthanasia, assisted suicide, the patient is provided with the lethal medication and takes it themselves. Assisted suicide, and obviously suicide, the person takes the decision to end his own life. So, as we said before, I just want to read a little bit, John, of this beautiful letter from Bishop Philip Egan, which will be promulgated tonight on the Vigil Mass, and tomorrow he's taken the occasion to put this forward in a pastoral letter. Pastoral letter, the bishop can choose any subject he wants, really. So in God's grace, he says, dear brothers and sisters, especially those of you caring for the sick and the dying, he says, I write to you today because our country faces a lethal choice. I refer to the bill before Parliament to legalize what they call assisted dying. I prefer to call it what it is: assisted suicide, helping someone to kill themselves. Let me give you 4 plain reasons why assisted suicide and euthanasia is wrong. Okay, the first one, he says, which is in line with what you've just already said, John. He said the option of assisted suicide would put intolerable pressure on the most vulnerable, upon the sick, the elderly, the disabled, and the dying. It would tempt them to feel they are an increasing burden and a financial drain on their family and others and in the society. They might start thinking it would be better to die. In other words, the right to die inescapably becomes a pressure to die and then a duty to die. That was his first reason. Second, to legalize assisted suicide would be to completely undermine the palliative care and the work of care homes. It could spell the end of hospices, since it would be cheaper, more efficient, and far less trouble to kill someone or to permit them to kill themselves than to care for them and generously fund their care. Third point, assisted suicide would place an unacceptable and immoral demand on the medical staff, expecting them to be accessories to killing. It would undermine the trust we normally place in doctors, making us suspicious of their motives. It would darken the atmosphere of medical wards that care for the elderly. Then point number 4, if the legislation is passed, even with the strictest limits for now, the thresholds of eligibility will keep creeping forward to cover more and more categories of persons, such as the mentally ill, those with depression and dementia, and severely disabled, sick babies, and so on. There are no limits, no safeguards, and it is unworkable. No government could guarantee that there will be not this mission creep. In fact, mission creep is happening in every jurisdiction where it is legal. Then he quotes the fact that 5% of deaths now in Canada are by lethal injection. But what he adds beautifully in the end of his letter is 2 immoral reasons why this is a sin. He says that suicide is a grave offense against God, against neighbor, and against self. against God, who is love, who in his love has given us the gift of our life, and so life is not ours to dispose of, against neighbor, because it unjustly breaks the ties of solidarity with family and others to whom we have obligations, and against self, because it contradicts the natural inclination of a human being to preserve and perpetuate. Suicide, he says, is totally against the law of charity. And then the last point, suicide is gravely sinful, although the church has always shown compassion to those who take their lives, relying on God's mercy whilst wondering whether they were fully aware of what they were doing. Yet when suicide is done with full knowledge and deliberate consent, as in assisted suicide, it is clearly a mortal sin. Clearly a mortal sin. Likewise, assisting someone to kill themselves is also a mortal sin, an accomplice in the crime. How could it be possible then to offer them the last sacraments? No? What justification could a person make when crossing into eternity after death, meeting the living God to give an account of their life and their death? So this is our prayer, he says, to conclude. To permit killing is wrong. It is to cross the line. It would be a shift of historic significance. It would be to capitulate the very ideology Britain fought against in the Second World War. So we need to mobilize, we need to campaign, and he talks about fasting and prayer and the rosary, etc. What do you think about that letter, John? Very nice, no?
Yeah, wonderful. No, one of the things that's been fantastic over the last week or so is to see the church speaking out, and the cardinal and several bishops coming out with their own statements. That is crucial. I don't know the absolute veracity of this, but I have heard people repeat that when abortion in the 60s was being pushed, that there was a lot of agonizing within the church that should they speak out against it. And Cardinal Heenan at the time was thinking, well, if I speak out against it, it's going to make it as if it's a Catholic issue, and maybe we shouldn't do that. But the reality is, those who promote evils in society always try to convince you not to speak up, not to fight back, because you can't win. They always find some reason for you to not fight. And I think it's really important that as a major voice in civil society, with the wisdom of thousands of years, the church really needs to warn people about this. And so it's fabulous that it just allows clarity to be established again within the Catholic community. But there are lots of people outside the Catholic community looking to us for a reference point, looking for us for clarity at a time of confusion. So that's a wonderful letter, and the statements are very profound, and that's what people need to hear. And there's lots of stories to back that up. I mean, we have been doing a tour actually with SPUC with Dr. Dominic Whitehouse, and it's been very well attended. We brought over Alex Schadenberg from Canada, who's a prominent campaigner against euthanasia and assisted suicide. The stories he tells you of what's happened in Canada are really alarming. I mean, people now being offered euthanasia because they find the life unbearable in any way, and that threshold for unbearable is pretty low. We're talking about people who are homeless, one person who couldn't get a ramp for their wheelchair to get into the flat, one person who had an allergic reaction to chemicals in their building. People like that being offered euthanasia, it's alarming, and some of them taking it. That's the worrying thing. People who are lonely, feeling I've got no other option. People who feel, well, my family don't really want me if they're saying this is available to me, and feeling they should. But not only that, the people over there, they call it MAID. And again, they always use terms that sound nice. I mean, who's against a MAID? But those people then become salespeople for euthanasia. And there's testimonies of them saying about how they love their work, how they enjoy it. I mean, so you're effectively allowing people to become serial killers by investing this power in them. So it's completely alarming. It's terrible what's happened in Canada. But you can see similar terrible stories in Belgium, in Switzerland, the Netherlands, Oregon, people feeling that I'm a burden. I really should get out of this. I shouldn't be putting all this pressure on my family. I'm lonely now. I don't have friends, or even I'm tired of life. That's now across Europe. People are saying that. Well, you're tired of life. You feel you've done your business. Let's time to go. But very, very useful for the bishops to be reminding people of that.
Just on this point, I have a question which I've pondered for a few years now. I'd like your opinion on it. Is, you know, the two topics we've talked about, abortion and assisted suicide, basically the same root against the dignity of life and the culture of death. Now, why is it that we seem to be able to push any law in position for abortion since 1967, and yet we've been able to resist with the assisted suicide? Any idea what the reason is on that?
Excuse me. There's probably several reasons, but Christian culture was always appalled by the idea of suicide. You can get back, you know, even before the creation of Europe, to St. Augustine talking about self-murder. So yeah, I think it was strong in Christian culture, and it's only as Christian culture falls away that we start to think, well, you know, killing yourself is not that bad. The other thing, I suppose, during the Nazi regime, they had propaganda using similar arguments. Ich klage an was a film, which is German. I was learning German recently, so I thought I'd try that. I accuse, and basically it was a propaganda film, and using the same things about a woman who was suffering, who had a terminal illness, and I accuse society for allowing me to suffer like this. That's what they used in 1941, and that was part of the T4 euthanasia program from the Nazis, and we all know how that developed. So the mass killing that happened under the Nazis was built on the acceptance of euthanasia. So the world after Nuremberg, the world saw that. So I think that made it very difficult for people coming forward, you know, eugenics movements. So it was really in the 70s and 80s that you started to see the Hemlock Society, the Voluntary Euthanasia Society coming forward. So they were just a bit behind the curve. Whereas with abortion, it can be much more hidden. And, you know, so you're able to say, oh, it's just a blob, but they're not really pregnant. And, you know, and people don't, so genuinely people didn't, in the 30s and 40s, people didn't have ultra scans. Now we all know, we can see it, you know, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, there's a tiny baby there. We can see that now. But people, it was convenient. And if you're really desperate, you know, for some people getting pregnant, you know, there's the whole shame thing of it as well. You know, so socially, again, a Christian society where children out of wedlock was a really big deal. So there's lots of emotional pressure about why you would justify abortion, and it could remain hidden. Whereas killing a fully developed human being, that took a lot of effort. And it wasn't really in the UK until they killed Tony Bland by dehydrating him to death. That they argued that it's actually better to be dead than alive. That was the first time that principle was used in law. So it's just the behind the curve, Father, I would say.
Yes,
for several reasons.
I remember Tony Bland because I followed the football. No, I think he died in the football. He was crushed, wasn't he, in Hillsborough?
The Hillsborough disaster.
The big football match. Okay, so we'll skip across to some of the questions, and then I've got some questions. Some of the questions personally, but Alison Cassidy says in the 1980s, my pro-life group used to show a wonderful film called The Silent Scream. I haven't found it anywhere for ages. Does John know where it's available and where to find it? The Silent Scream. Have you heard this one?
Yeah, of course. It's a really Bernard Nathanson's famous video. Yes, I'd be surprised if it's not somewhere on YouTube. But yeah, I'll certainly try. We will have a copy of it, so I can certainly try and get a copy of that to you. Yes. Yeah, by all means. But yes, it's certainly not as used as much. The other things is Dr. Levantino has done some videos. He was an abortionist who converted, and he has done some videos that are really, really interesting. You know, shocking actually. I mean, we've showed them, and people are in tears. But you know, you've got to warn people: do they want to see this? But he uses ones with animations, but animations which show the tools that use So there are similar things available which can be used for educational purposes.
So Rebecca Goodlad says, and we can tie a few questions into this one at the same time. Is it possible to set a Rosary Crusade to ask Our Lady Guadalupe to put the assisted dying bill underfoot? Could we have a simple website to sign on and a number counter? I don't know if you know, the Friars run a website called Mary's Crusade for Life, which you can see on the screen there now. This is basically has about over 2,000 people in the world receiving Holy Communion for the end of abortion, but to create a culture of life. So it's alive. So you've got 2,330 weekly communions across 38 countries. We need to develop this to because the Friars were involved in a lot of different activities, but we thought, no, what can we do from a spiritual point of view? And because somebody told us in Poland in the late 1970s, 1980s, there was a million abortions that went down to basically none because they had a campaign of Holy Communion, no, to end abortion. So we just pass this on to the listeners to encourage them to sign up and get their friends to sign up on this and to grow this. It only takes perhaps one country to get a hold of this. And it could balloon, no? All these people taking this is the key as Catholics to receive Holy Communion. So I don't know if you know, John Bishop. This was endorsed by Bishop John Keenan, and when he celebrates Mass, he has a miraculous medal on his altar. And when he comes to consecration, he looks at the medal, and that reminds him to make this intention every day. For Mary, he said, just to say, together with your rest of your intentions for Mary's Crusade for Life, and this is the mission. So the point that Rebecca makes is, can we do something in terms of setting up a Rosary Crusade? And this also ties in with the point Friday we were talking about this at lunchtime. I mean, for SPUC, is it possible, being Christian, to consecrate or to tomorrow is the feast of Christ the King, to consecrate SPUC to Christ the King? No, what do you think about that?
Yes, it sounds good. It sounds good to me. Yes, of course. I mean, what I would say is, not all of SPUC supporters are Catholic.
Yes.
But the majority are, and the approach we have is that we support people in their pro-life work from their cultural and religious values. So we're very supportive of that. That, for example, we do support the Torchlight Procession in Glasgow, which is a rosary. We do provide prayer materials for those who want them, but similarly for those who are not Catholic, who want, we produced a book called Love Thy Unborn Neighbour, which was aimed at evangelical Christians. But anyone could read that. So it's supporting people where they are, and but a lot of our supporters would be very interested in such a
I mean, could I ask you now?
Approach.
Could I ask you now? This sounds quite a convenient point. Being tea with Mary, and we always try to bring Our Lady into this. How important is Our Lady being in your life in this mission? No.
Yeah, well, it's a routine part of my life, I would say. I say the rosary every day. I do I do the first Saturday devotions every Saturday, and Bishop Keenan makes that available. He leads it himself in the Diocese of Paisley, so that's a great thing. Yeah. I mean, I can think back to even being a child, in every May making a altar to Our Lady, and so Our Lady has always been a part of my life growing up, and a continuing part, and reflecting on there's a great book, The Redeemer in the Womb, even reflecting in the role that she played in Christ coming into the world. He came in the womb. There must be a lesson there. He could have come by magic and appeared, as a 7-year-old, but he came in the womb. His full humanity and divinity were in the womb of Our Lady. So her role is pivotal, and you know, the pro-life movement centers around motherhood and those who want to damage motherhood and destroy motherhood. And so to have Our Lady, the perfect symbol of motherhood, at the front of that, and the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe is obviously highly important and significant. You know, and the fact, even the history of that, what happened, you know, to think of all the human sacrifice that was taking place in Mexico at the time of the apparition of Guadalupe, it's got a lot to say for our day.
Yes,
and a lot of our supporters take that very seriously, including myself.
Yes, I mean, it's interesting, you know, because, you know, when we, you know, I don't know how many hours I've spent in my life praying outside the abortion centres, and, you know, it seems that, you know, as Catholics, we have to be there to pick up the pieces at the end of the line, but the real tragedy is a loss of faith, and this is why you mentioned something in your past, and this is why to bring the faith back in Christ, we need Our Lady in the things like the Legion of Mary and things like that, no? So because people had the faith, they wouldn't end up at these places, no?
Yeah, it's turning your back in God. I was recently sort of looking at St. Augustine, some of his stuff in City of God, and the point he makes about evil always tends to non-existence. And when I was reading that, I just thought, that is interesting. In fact, that the such determined effort to annihilate human life, it's huge, you know. And you know, I suppose in the spiritual battle, Satan's effort is to annihilate. It is to non-existence. He resents that God created as he did. And in Genesis, we were promised, you know, that Our Lady will be the antidote to Satan's rebellion, you know. So it's very spiritually profound that Our Lady's yes to life was humanity's response or antidote to Satan's no to life, no to creation. He wants to annihilate things, and we see that. We're seeing all over the world just now with wars and violence, you know, but in particular the absolute determination to destroy marriage, to remove fertility, to stop women having children, to destroy those children. You know, so it's an all out intense struggle just now.
Yes,
there's a strong spiritual dimension. The spiritual dimension is key to that.
This is the message really tomorrow for the Christ the King, that you know, Christ hasn't just to reign as King and Our Lady as Queen in our hearts interiorly, but as part of the social structure, you know, and this divorce between the state and the church, you know, and the state trying to impose themselves. I mean, even it happened in England a few times, I think, where the courts have intervened to actually try to compel people and force people, mothers, to have an abortion. All right, we've got another question here from Radio Makalata, which is one of the friars, which is a quite interesting question. Thank you, John, for your witness. You have had experience being interviewed by some media outlets. Did they treat you fairly with their questions and attitude?
I don't do as many interviews as I used to. When I worked for the bishops, I did do more. No, there was I could often feel a resentment, you know, and when you go in, and in those days you used to go in and get your makeup done. They were always lovely, always very pleasant there, and some notable exceptions. I'm going to forget their names just now, but the guy I remember on, I think it was Newsnight, Campbell. I've forgotten his first name. That's terrible. But he was a lovely guy. He was fair. That's all I asked for, people to be fair, you know. But typically they're ready just to cut you down, and you know, there's a lack of politeness there. But some are better than others. But yeah, you just sort of accept that. You just sort of go and think, right, okay, I'm not expecting to be liked in here. Just stick to the message. Try to be as kind as you can. Try not to.
It's a beautiful way.
They've been sort of convinced that, you know, this is, you know, we're evil. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
They genuinely believe that. You know, they don't think for themselves. They genuinely think this wicked guy is coming in to the studio, and I'm actually willing to have him in here. I'm not going to be nice to him, but you know, I'll let them have a word, but you know, they're ready to twist it, and you know, and
it's a good way to grow in virtue, no?
Father, I've often thought about why am I doing this job? You know, like why am I doing this job? And a lot of it comes down to it's not made me a patient person, but it's made me capable of acting as if I'm patient.
Hey, this is why you know, I mean, we know Monsignor Philip Riley, who started to help us with God's precious infants, and you know, this is a terrible thing, abortion, killing our brothers and sisters in the womb, but you know, we have to carry the message of life with joy in our hearts. No, this comes on another question I have as we draw to a close. Now, a few years ago, I heard at an SPUC conference somebody called Dr. Joseph Meany. He was, I think he's either for Human or Family Life International. I can't remember which one, but he was speaking about in Corpus Christi in Texas, that there was no abortion facilities. And somebody asked the question why, and you know, and he said that in his opinion, we have to change hearts first before we change the law. Now, I just want to ask you to comment on that, and then could you give us your comments? Is, you know, what can we do? Is anything else we can do? Is there going to be some solution to this this travesty that we are living in now?
I think abortion will eventually, there will be no abortions. How it will come about, I mean, I can see the sort of worst case scenario for me is they will get to a point where it's so demographically damaging that the state cannot invest in killing any more children for the future. So economically, we will not be able to accept that we are spending any money on abortions. So I think that sort of will be one way it will change. I think the politicians who are in place just now, I don't think there are many of them who are willing to think this through in great depth. So we've got the ones who are committed pro-life, you know, so they just know killing unborn. But I think the majority in the middle just think, oh, well, it's a done deal, you know, we need abortion, and I don't want to think about it. And then you've got the absolute militants who need to advance it. So you've got them. So they're still going, and they seem to have absolute control through the health services, you know, the civil service, the governments. So politics is in a really bad state. Culturally, it will change first. So I think if a lot of the work we are doing at SPUC is in the cultural battle. So we do a lot of effort for reaching out to young people, trying to reach out to the wider world. You know, we do dramas. We train people up to become writers, to become script writers. We've made a drama that's on Prime Video just now, Amazon Prime. You can look that up. It's called An Irish Angel. So we're doing that, and we're trying to encourage people to get into the industries that shape people's values. And one of the ways you shape people's values is just telling them stories that are meaningful. Because if you try and just convince their intellect, it doesn't work.
Yes.
And that's the problem. People are not driven by their intellect. Alistair McIntosh's book, After Virtue, is fantastic. Scottish philosopher. He talks about the collapse during the 20th century of the ability to actually reason and actually to have reasoned debates on moral issues. It's completely collapsed. It's all about emotion and who can play the biggest emotional trump card. But people can learn through stories and through witness. People, and his view is that you can see, you know, virtue when you see it. So you can look at how people behave. You think, you know what, that person is doing the right thing and that person's not. So we have to show the world what virtue looks like. And the contrast to that will seem unacceptable. So we can change culture. I think that could change quite rapidly. I think that there is a sensitization in some ways that people are quite emotional to life and they can be sentimental. So sentimentality is easy to manipulate, of course, but you know it could go the other way. So we just if some of these famous people or celebrities would start to change the view, their views, then it will impact lots of people. But economically, someone will have to wake up and say, "What we have destroyed our society." It could be that someone, so I mean, some things I think, as someone at a very high level, at a UN level, have they decided they want to see Europe collapse? They try and level it with the rest of the world. Have they decided that? But they certainly are doing everything they can to promote the killing of the unborn, certainly, to sort of destroy or at least undermine the structure of family life. That's a massive effort they've put into that. And why on earth would you do that? You just have to, let's just look at the evidence. Look at the evidence. Why would you invest in something that's bad for society? But they seem determined to do it. But there will come a stage where you just think, well, we can't allow these guys to keep doing this. Someone will have to say, economically, actually, men and women marrying and committing for life to look after children, and then bringing up children who can make a useful contribution to society and the economy and become future taxpayers and look after the elderly. Do you know what I mean? The implications are so obvious, but we are facing, a radicalized group of people in public policy now who just don't seem willing to think for themselves.
It's interesting. You mentioned a few times the word virtue. And the value of married life and sacrifice and the modesty in life. To realize, that God's given us this gift of life, and we have to try it as best as possible with the light of faith to try to live a life of virtue, and it's how we behave, as you said. It's how we behave. We're down the high street in Dundee, and it's not easy to engage with people who are fixing the ideas. So we were just trying to give them some medals, miraculous medals, and ask them to make a prayer if they can. And just as you said, tell stories. We had a beautiful, a few years ago, we were outside the abortion centre in Bournemouth, and a lady came out, and we took her to the cafeteria in Asda, down the road, and when she sat down and she decided to keep the child there, moved in a womb like John the Baptist, the child, as if it was somersaulted, because at that moment the child knew that it was wanted, It's quite beautiful, So this is a question that we have for you now, as we draw into a close. Have you got any stories that just quick stories you could tell the listeners about anything conversion, or when you've spoken to people, etc.?
Conversion. Sometimes I think these are hidden from you, so that maybe or
the change of mind, shall we say?
Change of minds.
Yes.
People are unlikely to change their mind in front of you. Once a guy stopped me in the street. Well, he was actually haranguing people at a chain, pro-life chain, and I sort of overheard them, and I went over and I said, and it was just, he just had picked people at random in the chain to decide he was going to have a go at them. And I went over, I said, I can ask you questions if you want. And he started off like, do you help women? I said, well, actually, we try. And I answered his questions quite factually. And he went, oh, okay, that's all right then. And then he walked off, and I was quite surprised like how reasoned he had been. He had come with as if we were just crazies out there haranguing women, but when he listened to the argument, he went, oh, yeah, that makes sense. So occasionally you get people like that. We hear all sorts of things, the stories, some of the stories from the people who do counselling, they're always worried if you mention names of counsellors or anything like that. But anyway, I remember one counsellor telling me that she got a phone call, and it was a man sobbing, and he was crying because his wife had taken the abortion pill, and basically she'd delivered a tiny baby, and he said, I've got the baby in my hand, and he was crying. And he just goes, what can I do? He said, we didn't know, and I genuinely think some people think, I'm pregnant. Oh, does this pill you take, you're unpregnant? It doesn't seem to equate in them. But the counsellor said that you need to, for the sake of your wife, pull yourself together out, because he had a tiny baby in his hand, and that was his baby. So that witness, that man, it's a shame. You think of that's suppressed by the media, but they must think of the millions of people who must be in similar situations. So it's quite heartbreaking. And what we try to do at SPUC and all the people involved in the pro-life movement is try to stop that happening to more people. And actually, we've got a service, like if you look up Arch, for women who've had abortion, or even men who've been involved. We have a counselling service, and it's not trying to convert anyone. It's just if you're hurting, they can try and help. And I've spoken. Another woman I spoke to who had an abortion, she told me that when she came across this person won't mind me mentioning her name. She was the Arch counsellor, Margaret Cuthill. And she said, when I came across Margaret Cuthill, I hated myself. I'd had an abortion, and I would never go into a church. I knew God hated me. And when I was in the shower, I would scrub myself, because I knew I was unclean. And when I met her, she was full of joy. And she said, Margaret Cuthill gave me healing. And she said, I know God has forgiven me. Beautiful. And so the lesson for me on that is there's so many people don't want to talk about this issue, and they think it's going to hurt people. But if we don't talk about it, you're denying people the opportunity of that healing. And when I met that, when I went to interview her down in her home, and she was there with her husband and her other children, and she was full of joy and peace, but she didn't have that. And so we're offering something that's much better. And I think that falls into that category of virtue, and the good from the evil when you see it.
It's beautiful. Okay, another question, which is quite interesting. When we were engaging this youth in the high street in Dundee, all following basically the lies that they've been told, probably in the school. But how do we get to the heart of the youth? They've all been led. The masses have been led astray.
Yeah, that's difficult. Well, that's why we're trying to find new ways of doing it. So we do a lot of work on drama. So if people want to search, they can look up Life Voice. So Life Voice, we do dramas, and we tell they're based on real life stories, and it gives them young people a chance to walk in the shoes of other people who've been in the various predicaments around the right to life challenges.
Are you allowed in the schools?
Oh yeah, we go into schools. We speak probably we speak to about 10,000 pupils a year. So we do get into schools. And our key speaker is called Emmett Dooley. Emmett is fantastic. He's got a great love for young people.
Yes.
And he's got a great passion for life. So I think when they meet him, it really, I think he's an absolutely fantastic speaker.
Yeah.
And we've got other speakers. Like that as well. That Emmett is nurturing and helping. So we do go into schools. I'd like to grow that more. But we're coming up with innovative materials as well. We have materials, for example, for primary schools that are all about just showing you the beauty of life in the womb. So it's called the Tiny Feet program. So if people can look that up. We also have other materials for showing people. We've got 3D imaging. So it's an app that you can use, and you can just hold the app on your phone over an image, and you can see the baby come to life in 3 dimensions. So that's quite fantastic. So there's lots of things that we're trying to do and be innovative to get to young people, but and anything that comes under the sort of control of government is very, very controlled. They've got a very distorted understanding of education. They think you have to say abortion is good before you're actually educating people.
Of course, even in the Catholic schools. Also, okay, we have another question. I don't know whether I don't know whether John wants to answer this, but the question is quite topical. Is about voting for Trump. This both of these candidates have got. Promoting this grave evil against life. The Catholic position would be to vote for a lesser evil, because at least Trump has some policies which are going to defend the Catholic faith, basically, in the right to speak. So it would be a bad thing, I think, not to vote. Because then that would effectively give the vote to the other person, no?
Yeah, well, the Catholic position is always to use your vote as wisely as you can. So use your vote wisely, assess the character. So I think you've got. I think for us, there's no question between what's most important. Someone who's a bit rude and insulting, that's wrong. you know, but there's a thing out there that's it's very much used that, oh well, if you support them on this issue, it means you're trying to justify everything they do. That's not the case. People need to remember that. So anyway, thankfully I've got no locus in how Americans vote. Hopefully they'll do the right thing. But I think in terms of the future, in terms of the whole agenda, this is a cultural divide. It's very polarized in America. It's very polarized. The trouble in the UK, it's not polarized at all. They're all on the same side. They're all in the anti-life side, every party, you know, so there is a divide. I don't think it's healthy that it's polarized between Republicans or typically in the pro-life side and the Democrats are in the pro-abortion, pro-youth. That's unhealthy. But when that's the situation and you've got an opportunity to halt the advance of abortion, we're seeing the absolute determination to advance abortion on one side, and those who are just not, you know, maybe they'll restrict it in some parts. You saw with Roe v. Wade being overturned, it's pushed down to state level, and you're starting to see those fights taking place at a state level. So yeah, people need to think wisely, and if you support someone in one issue, it doesn't mean to say you agree with everything they do on every other issue, or you support the way they speak or the conduct or every other misdemeanor they've ever made in their life.
I've got another question just popped into my head. Thank you, Guardian Angel. Is interesting question. Is in the States you have you know, just roughly these 50% Catholic in the pro-life movement, and then you've got evangelical Baptists, etc. Now, why is that not the case in the UK? Basically, in the UK, it's predominantly Catholic. Any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it has. I think it's starting to change. I think we're seeing more evangelical organizations taking a strong position. So you have Christian Institute, you have CARE, you have Christian Concern, and they're really fantastic organizations, really doing strong, powerful work in leadership. I think the fact that for so long the Catholic Church had clarity and unity just coming from a leadership, just the nature of the Catholic Church is it's much more monolithic. So when you've got that being repeated time and time again from the Pope all the way down, that has retained that unity. So the Catholics were able to resist the culture for longer. So typically Christians in any church will absorb some of the culture around about them. But if you've got some means of maintaining the barrier, you know, some determined effort to ensure your people can resist or can identify where the culture is wrong, as long as you've got that going on, then you have more resistance. But when you don't have that, when you've got that broken down in the sort of non-Catholic denominations, they don't have that strength of unity. So you started to see a minister here, a minister there, and oh well, we can understand. And so we saw that move through the 20th century within the Anglican Church in particular, and the Church of Scotland. They for whatever reason, they just want to go with the world. And if the world thinks it's a good idea, if you're not really on top of understanding philosophically and ethically where it's going, you're not going to be able to resist it very well. And that's where we're failed. And we're starting to see that's been a 100-year battle for that to break down inside the Catholic Church. And we're starting to see that as well now. Catholics are losing a bit of confidence in some of the moral issues. And I think sometimes it may have been good intentions. As I said, Cardinal Heenan at that time, there was a belief that, oh, if we speak out, we're going to make this a Catholic issue, and then we'll end up losing because there'll be a backlash against Catholics. That was if I get time to tell a quick anecdote about that in Belgium. In Belgium, I was told, I once had a meeting with someone, and he said that he had a child with a disability, and he would be stopped and accosted in the streets, being told that he was cruel for allowing his child to be born. And he'd gone to the highest levels in Belgium to try and fight against this. It was a law, the euthanasia law for children that he was fighting against. And he told me that he couldn't get any support from the Catholic bishops. And so anyway, I was working for the church at the time, and I looked into this, and I was told, yeah, the bishops have taken a deliberate policy not to speak out against it, because if they do, it will just harden the opposition. So it was a tactic. It didn't mean they endorsed it; they were against it, but they just thought we're just going to make it worse if we fight against it. So that is sometimes where people, churchmen, are coming from. But we can't let the light of truth go out in society. We can't stand by. Don't fall. I think we shouldn't fall for that. It's a tactic of the opposition. Don't fall for that. Keep telling the truth. Keep telling your people the truth. Explain to them where other people have got it wrong. Do it charitably, of course. Try and understand if there's good intention there. But be realistic. There are some people out there who have bad intention, and there's a hardcore of people who make lots of money from the culture of death.
Yes.
And there's people who are anti-human at very high levels, who for some reason think human beings being on the planet is a bad thing.
Okay, so we draw to a close. I've just got one final point. The SPUC, was that the first pro-life movement, really?
It was the first pro-life organization in the world, a specifically pro-life organization in the world that, again, simply because the UK were first to have a parliament debating abortion.
Yes.
So it was in response to that.
So
yeah, we believe we were the first in the world pro-life group, and yeah, so it's been a long battle.
Yes.
But we're up for it. We're keeping going, and we've got lots of stuff to be pleased about. We've got a massive, extensive group of young people involved in our work now, and we've got lots of ideas of how we're planting the pro-life message in the wider culture, and we believe that will have fruit in the future.
Yes, beautiful. No, so we pray the friars, and we have sisters here, Franciscans, to bless your apostolate and your work for our Lord to make people realize that God has a plan for all these children, and the beauty and the dignity of life. No, God will always bring a good out of this moral evil, which we battle in our times. But as we mentioned in this podcast, one of the greatest way to battle this culture of death is to be holy. Is to be holy, is to enter into the interior life and live a life of the sacraments of the church, pray the rosary, as John said, and this is the way forward. But we all have to do our little part. So we thank John, and we pray for this intention, especially for this assisted suicide attempt in November the 16th. We can probably invoke. What do you think, Margaret of Scotland, in this campaign?
I'm sure saints are allowed to extend their graces to
of course,
other countries.
So we'll invoke her help and the other Scottish saints. Okay, so we'll finish off with a prayer and a blessing in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus.
Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Okay, I'll give a blessing through the infinite merit and the passion of our Lord Jesus Christ, and to the Immaculate Redemptrix and glorious Saint Joseph and Saint Margaret of Scotland. May Almighty God bless you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. So God bless, John, and we'll pray for you and ask for many blessings on your endeavors to bring back the culture of life. Ave Maria.
Thanks, Father. Ave Maria.